Today we're diving into the wonderful world of thrift store frames, those hidden gems that most folks just pass by without even a second glance. But not me, I always sort through them and I always see the potential where others just might see meh. So forget about spending a fortune on fancy pictures and frames because I've got some ultimate budget-friendly frame upcycles that are both fun and frugal. We got lots of work. Let's get started. This is the first thrift store frame that we're going to work on, and this is an easy one because it didn't even have a print in it and it's really easy to take apart. We're just going to remove the back and the pieces of cardboard and the matte frame, set that aside, and I have this piece of paper that I've painted some of my previous DIY projects on, and I love all the different variations of the different colors from my different projects. I want to add a little bit of depth and interest though to it, so I took some acrylic paint, I grabbed one of my tin cans, and I'm going to stamp some circles just randomly on it, and I really love the contrast of this blue color. This is such a thrifty way to upcycle frames because we're just using an old piece of paper that otherwise most people would have just thrown out. But I kind of think it almost looks like an abstract painting. I've got some stamps that I'm going to use too. I've got some of my yellow acrylic paint, and I'm just going to roll it in the corners or wherever I think that it needs a little bit more interest. Thrift store frames are something that you can find really easily in every thrift store. Just sort through, find things that catch your eye or are a little bit more original, and there's so many ideas of how you can upcycle them. I've got 4 projects today, so make sure you stick through to the end because there's some really fun ones that are really thrifty and you can do on a complete budget. I also had a little flower stamp. I'm just stamping in little areas here and there. I kind of like the way that it looks now. I think it's just about ready. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry completely. Now it's dried completely, we're going to add it back into the frame, putting it all together. I'm going to tape it at the top with a little bit of packing tape so it stays in place. Put the backing on, put the staples back in, and then we're going to head into my craft room because we're going to break out my Cricut. I don't use my Cricut very often, but this is a project that is perfect for it. I got out some permanent vinyl. I designed a graphic. This graphic's available on my Etsy store. So once you see this finished project, and if you like it, you can head to my Etsy store and check it out. And we're cutting it. I'm going to weed all that extra vinyl off. And then we're going to stick this onto the front of that glass on the frame. And it kind of gives it almost like a 3D effect. Of course, you can use any type of quote or picture and put it on the glass on top of your print, and you can personalize it. So many ways to do a project like this, just use your imagination. But I love being able to use that piece of paper underneath that I did previous DIY projects on and incorporate it into this thrift store frame upcycle. What do you think? I absolutely love it, and it's definitely one of a kind. Next thrift store frame upcycle. This is an old antique frame. It didn't have any backing, but I love the ornate frame. And I've got a perfect thing that I can complete this project with. I first had to cut a piece of wood to fit on the inside of this frame. I had a piece of scrap veneer wood. I used my jigsaw to cut it to fit the frame. And then I found this tapestry at the thrift store. It was in with the linens. Gorgeous. Somebody has spent so much time on this, and I can't believe it just getting donated to the thrift store. I did an absolute happy dance, and I think it's going to be really beautiful to display in my fall decor. I'm going to make sure I'm putting this centered in that frame, and then I'm going to fold over that extra material. I'm not going to cut any of this because I don't want to do anything to the original piece in case I ever want to take it off and use it for something else. And then I'm using my staple gun, and I'm just going to really carefully pull it nice and tight and staple it all along the inside. So some other ideas when you're at the thrift store is to go into the scrap fabrics or linens or pillowcases or tea towels. There's so many that would look beautiful framed in those old vintage ornate wooden frames. So I love the way this turned out. Somebody has spent so much time creating this, and I'm glad that I was able to upcycle it and make it beautiful again. This is a vintage frame, probably from the 70s. It's that plastic molded frame, and the print inside is in horrible shape. It's really sun faded, and it was only $3.19. Yes, this had to come home with me because I knew I could upcycle it. And trust me, you don't have to be an artist to do this upcycle. I know nothing about oil painting or watercolor paints. I just have cracked out my acrylic paint, and I'm kind of thinking back to what the original color of this print wouldn't be, and then using my acrylic paints to match it the best I can. And I'm kind of dabbing up and down. In the areas of the grass, I'm using this beautiful green. And by using that dabbing motion, it kind of gives the illusion that it's that original oil painting. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to work away on this whole print and make those colors vibrant again. This turned out absolutely beautiful. And for $3.19, I was able to save this print. And when it was finished, it looks like a oil painting. So look through the thrift store frames. If you see something that's sun faded or just doesn't look as vibrant anymore, you can try this technique. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Oil paintings are never really perfect, so give it a go. I'm also going in with a little bit of Kleenex and just dabbing it here and there to give it a little bit more texture too, and to blend it in. Now this was just a print, it wasn't an original, but you could even do this on a original oil painting or watercolor painting. Just make sure before you do that you're making sure that it's not worth any money or that it's not a collectible. We don't want to be ruining somebody's original artwork. This, of course, is just a print, so we were good to go. This project I found was so relaxing. I went out to my shed, I put on a podcast, I made a cup of tea, and I just worked away at this, and it took me about an hour. I thoroughly enjoyed this project. So relaxing, blending paints and dabbing it up and down. Definitely going to be looking for more projects like this to do at the thrift store. Now we have this all painted and finished. It's much more vibrant, way better than the before, but I still want to seal this up. So I'm going to get out my Mod Podge. I'm using my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to pour a little bit in a dish, and I'm going to take my paintbrush and paint over this entire print with a sponge. I want to dab it up and down so it gives that authentic oil painting look. It just gives it some texture. And once that first coat was dry, I took some of my instant coffee and warm water and added a little bit of Mod Podge in it. I want to kind of give it that sepia look, that aged vintage look of an old oil painting. And I'm going to just brush it on with my paintbrush, doing strokes every which way. Again, that's going to give it that look of that old oil painting. as I'm finishing this project up, I found there was a little bit too much gold showing in the ornate frame. So I'm just going over it with some of my black homemade chalk paint just to tone it down a little bit. And then I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to go back in with a baby wipe and just wipe off the top bits of that paint on all of that ornate frame. And I think we're just about done. This might be the best $3.19 that I've ever spent on a thrift store find for the way that it turned out. This isn't so much a thrift store frame, but it's a wooden plaque, $1.99. How can you not grab this and bring it home and upcycle it? It had this really ugly blue color already painted on it, so I'm going to distress it a little bit. I'm going to put on some black homemade chalk paint over the whole frame, let that completely dry. Then I'm going to add some Vaseline around the edges. This is just going to create a chippy finish when it's all done, kind of give it that authentic look. This is a really great easy technique if you have a piece of brand new wood and you want to make it look old. And now I'm going to paint over top of that Vaseline and black paint with some white homemade chalk paint and just paint the whole plaque, let it dry. Then I'm going to go in with my sander. I've got some 80 grit sandpaper on my palm sander and sand all around the edges. And now we're ready to upcycle this wooden plaque. I had this old piece of newspaper and I am going to decoupage it onto the front of this plaque using my Mod Podge mat. Now, a trick to decoupaging is to not use very much Mod Podge or you're going to get wrinkles. Inevitably, you're going to get some wrinkles, but if you don't want to get a lot, don't goop up on the Mod Podge. Just put a light coat. You don't need very much. Spread it right out to the edges, and then we're going to lay that plaque into that newspaper and pressing it down firmly. We're going to flip it over and then we're going to rub out any wrinkles or any bubbles that might have happened. Again, with this project, you can put your own twist on it. You could use tissue paper, wrapping paper, so many possibilities. I just love that farmhouse look, so I've kind of gravitated to this old piece of newspaper. It's completely dry. Now I'm going in with a piece of sandpaper and I'm lightly sanding around the edge, and you can see how it gives you that nice, crisp, clean, sanded edge to work with your project. Now we're going to go in with some instant coffee and warm water, and we're going to age up this newspaper a little bit. We're not going to soak it. We're just putting a light coat across that whole newspaper, and you can see as soon as I introduce it onto that, how it gives it that vintage feel. I put this outside in the sun to dry completely, and now we're going to bring it back into the shed, and I've got some polyacrylic sealer and I'm sealing up this paper. You don't need very much, just a light coat. Again, if you're putting on too much, you're going to introduce those wrinkles and bubbles to come back into your paper. So just a light coat. We're going to set this aside and let it dry. I had this smashed tin can that I made quite a while ago in one of my tin can videos. I used my Cricut to add the label on the front, and I had this old hook. We're going to put the hook in the top of the plaque, put some floral foam in that tin can. I had these old flowers that I dried a long time ago from Valentine's Day that I'm going to incorporate into it and make a beautiful arrangement. And then we're going to pull it all together. We're going to hang that tin can on the front of that hook. I also added a hook on the back so we can hang it up. We don't want to forget about the hooks on the back. And all of this was put together so affordably. A tin can from the recycling bin, a plaque for $1.99, an old piece of newspaper that I had, and I love the way that it turned out. So I hope you found some thrift store frame inspiration here. Would love to know down in the comments which one was your favorite. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. And if you love this video, I'm sure you're going to love either of these next two.